Here we go, guys. Why Europe is insanely well designed. What is there to say? We have a lot to learn. I know it's a lot different than the USA, that's for sure, and I'm eager to learn why it's done so well. This is from a channel called OBF. It'll be linked in the description down below, so go watch the whole thing uninterrupted. Here we go, guys.
This is a map of Europe's mass transit railway system across 33 countries. The yellow lines indicate the presence of a train line, and as you can see, it's very dense. There are hardly any spaces where there isn't any coverage for railways.
That's amazing.
Now, if we compare this to a map of railroad tracks in the US, it's a different story.
Yeah, Amtrak, as you can see, way less coverage, I gotta admit. Granted, the US is really big, but Amtrak is just not used by barely anyone. Unfortunately, you need a car here. You just do.
While parts of the US have some good mass transit, there are large areas of the country which isn't covered by Amtrak, the nation's largest passenger railroad service. But let me show you another map, this time of high-speed rail in Europe. Now obviously, high-speed railways aren't going to be as common as regular speed railways, as they require excellent design, strict planning, and massive investment. And yet, as we can see, high-speed rail is present in Europe, which is a stark contrast to the US, as you can see from this map. While the US does have some higher speed rail, like the Aquila line in the Northeastern Corridor, it's hardly an effective map of transport solutions. And the Aquila line isn't really that fast either. It can reach about 150 miles per hour, but averages less than 70. This is not the case for Europe's insanely well-designed railroad system. And you have to remember that Europe's system accomplishes this while spanning 33 different nations in a very diverse continent. And I know what you're probably thinking. This is just because Europe is smaller than the United States, which simply isn't true. While the European Union is smaller than the US, continental Europe has an area that is about 1.04 times as much as the US. So we can dismiss this argument that the United States can't be that well designed because it's too big. Europe simply is better designed.
Alright, strike one for me. I've already said it was very big, but
But if you're American, you might not understand why railroad tracks or public transport as a whole is so important. I mean, driving a car works fine, right? Well, no. And Europe showcases why a primary focus on private transportation is so detrimental to a well-functioning transit system. Look at these maps. They show the US road network versus the EU's. And as you can see, the EU's road network is not nearly as impressive as the US's. And yet, when you look at some of the most congested cities in the world, European countries don't feature particularly prominently in the global rankings. This is pretty shocking information because you'd assume that the country with a more expansive road network has a lot less congestion, especially considering the United States has devoted lots of time and money to their highways. So how come Europe is less congested when they have fewer roads? Well, it all comes down to disincentivizing the use of cars and, most importantly, making an attractive alternative. Europe does this by having both private and public transportation infrastructure, which technically the US has as well, it's just a lot worse. But on top of this, Europe makes it pretty expensive to buy, own, and use a car.
That's one thing I always forget in the back of my head, but I hear from a lot of people on this channel's community. I've heard through other media that driving a car, when it comes to like insurance, licenses, and then of course things like fuel, that's a big one. That stuff is shockingly expensive in a lot of European countries from what I know. And that would, even though I'm a big car guy, I mean, I'd find time to drive cars, I think, for sure, no matter where I'm at. But yeah, when it comes to day-to-day, or if I had some specific commute, I'd probably lean towards taking public transport because it's efficient and it's cost-effective in Europe. Like I said, or like he said, rather. We do technically have public transportation here in the U.S. too. It's just not very planned out. Everything really, in reality, is designed for cars. It just is. Luckily, owning a car here is much cheaper, I believe, than a lot of countries. But it has its own pains, right? Its own struggles. Trying to rely on public transport here is just kind of, I would say, probably a joke compared to Europe in comparison.
Achieved by having high taxes on vehicles and gasoline. In fact, here's a map of worldwide gasoline prices. As you can see,
Wow.
European nations are in the top rankings, while the US lies at the
Way down
bottom,
there.
charging very little. But let me be very
That's
clear.
amazing.
It's only a good idea to make it expensive to drive a car if you have an attractive alternative, which
Right.
America doesn't, but
Right.
Europe does. I mean, obviously this wouldn't work in the US with its current transportation infrastructure, but in Europe, this is a great strategy because you make the roads less congested for those who actually need them and give everyone else an affordable and efficient alternative.
Now, Europe really found out how to do this the right way. They I got to admit, even just this early stage of learning this, I got to say it's good on Europe because basically what I'm gathering is their public transport is really good and people can rely on it and it can create a nice day-to-day life for them when it comes to transportation. And also, if you do choose to drive a car, an automobile in Europe, it probably in most cases is more, efficient and more relaxed than driving in the USA as well, even though our claim to fame is driving cars, right? Even driving a car is better because, like he said, there is less people on the road in cars. So there's going to be a lot less bunched up traffic than you'd see in big cities here. And less people, less problems. It's kind of funny. They actually ended up getting both the best worlds, it seems, in Europe. And it's very impressive. Looking from afar, I must say.
Being Europe's amazing public transport like the trains on the railways. This is arguably the better strategy because even though the vast majority of Americans have access to vehicles at around 91% and gas is comparatively cheap, it still leaves 9% who don't have access to vehicles.
That's
what
true.
are these people who can't afford a car supposed to do? I mean, sometimes public transport isn't even an option or is simply too expensive for many. So you've now actively excluded those who aren't exactly the most well off from society.
And that's not
to make
good.
matters worse, some cities actually got rid of their public transport to make room for more cars. I'm not joking.
The real problem was that once cars appeared on the road, they could drive in streetcar tracks. Yeah, okay.
American streetcars like trams were actually removed to make way for bigger roads. Absolutely insane. Compare that to Oslo, Berlin and Madrid, where discussions are underway to restrict or even exclude most cars from the city center.
I have to say, not that it's great or as good as most places in Europe, but I do have to say, when we lived in Las Cruces, New Mexico, we would always go to El Paso, sister city, right down the road. El Paso, Texas does have a really cool tram in downtown El Paso. I'll leave it to you to look it up if you are curious enough. It's really cool looking. Had a nice look, and a lot of people like it there.
Let's not forget that when you have cars, you also need somewhere to park them. And this is where things start to become rather ridiculous. You see, the United States has 2 billion parking spaces for 250 million cars.
Holy smokes. Is that right? I'm going to assume that's accurate or fairly accurate. 2 billion parking spaces. Wow. For only 250 million cars. 250 million cars is a lot, but not in relation to 2 billion.
It's 8 parking spaces per vehicle. In Europe, it's pretty much a 1-to-1 with around 250 million public parking spaces for 300 million cars.
Right.
But to emphasize the ridiculousness of this even further, the area that the US dedicates for car parking is actually larger than the area dedicated for housing people. It's honestly unbelievable that people are being squeezed out of American cities due to regulators wanting to make more room for parking spaces. This simply wouldn't fly in the EU, as it has a whole policy dedicated to improving urban planning. See, the EU spent 115 billion euros between 2014 and 2020 to improve city design by making it smarter, greener, and more connected.
It's awesome.
Simply meaning they allocated funds to make their cities more efficient, more connected, and better for the environment.
Wow.
And better for the environment they really are, as the average resident in a typical Western US city, such as Los Angeles or Phoenix, contributes approximately 6 times more carbon to the atmosphere per capita than an average European city resident.
I believe it.
This is purely the result of not having effective transport solutions, which saves resources and allows people to move about efficiently. And exactly that, moving about efficiently, is something most of Europe's citizens are able to do as a result of the European Union. See,
yeah, it's crazy. Talking about parking lots like that many is just unreal. And long story short, it creates everyone has to move away from the city. And then, everything becomes so sprawled out. Then you have suburb after suburb after suburb of people that live in LA or Phoenix or Albuquerque or Chicago or wherever. And it's so spread out. So then you have more people commuting, more people driving long distance into the city to work and then back to the suburbs. And you get it. It's a big mess, and there's parking lots everywhere. So then you have buildings and then parking lots and buildings. It's like it makes everything just more spread out. It creates more heat, like especially in our southern U.S. It gets so hot lately. The climate's been absolutely nuts, and it's hotter than ever because there's just so much blacktop. There's so much parking lots radiating heat all day. It is a crazy thing. It is a crazy thing, and it's a big problem. And I don't know what the deal is, other than, I think we all know the U.S. could be way more efficient and better designed. Perhaps more in line with parts of Europe. But I think it's more, I think we know the answer. I think it seems like most of the time it's, why go to the trouble redesigning these cities, just it is what it is. That kind of seems like the attitude here. I don't know.
Most of Europe's nations are in the European Union, which gives the EU citizens a number of perks, which includes a free travel area. This has been one of the most important achievements of the EU,
That's
as
really
it makes
nice.
it possible for an EU citizen to travel freely to other EU member states and stay for up to 3 months. All they
That's
need
really
is
cool.
a passport or even just an ID card. No
Wow.
visas, no trips to embassies, no form filing, just head straight over. This makes it incredibly easy to travel, study, and work in other countries and communities, and having this level of centralization is very important to good design, as it gives the smartest people the opportunity to work where they are most useful. And since good design obviously requires a lot of complicated problem solving and planning, this is very smart. Another smart thing is the incredible biking infrastructure we see in Europe,
Yes.
perfectly illustrated by this map of bike path density
Oh, wow.
in Europe.
That's
All
incredible.
the purple lines are bike paths, and
Look at like Czechia, Slovakia, very impressive. Up here, Germany. Look at, but totally, Netherlands is off the charts. I mean, look at that. That is a bike-friendly place if I've ever seen one. Very impressive, and I like that. I need to get on a bicycle way more often. Every phase I've had in my life where I rode a bike, I loved it. And it's great for you. It's great exercise, and it's efficient, right? It's great for the planet. Great, it's a fun way to ride around, right? Why drive a car somewhere within reason when you could just ride a bicycle? It's unfortunately, again, it's the U.S. is just not very bike friendly, other than for recreation, riding in your own area somewhere. But relying on it to get to a job or something is just not realistic for a lot of people here.
there's clearly a lot of them, especially towards the left side of the map, but that's just because this is the home of the Dutch, the Netherlands. Now, the funny thing is, I won't be able to compare this to a map of bike path density in the United States, because such a map hasn't been made. At least I wasn't able to find any,
Probably
and I can
not.
only wonder why. But anyway, what Europe and also the
Yeah,
European
why?
Union has achieved is pretty remarkable, as it's hard to think of another set of such diverse countries where you would be able to travel so freely, in an efficient and inexpensive manner. I mean, you can literally get from Paris to Amsterdam, for example, in just 3 hours for around $30.
Oh my
Imagine
God,
being able
that's
to
amazing.
travel all over Asia without any border crossings, checks, or visas, and being able to
That's
stay
amazing.
for months at a time. That would be truly amazing. And let's not
Wow.
forget that European design has always been distinctive and very successful. In fact, the continent's history of design and interconnectedness serves as a model for the rest of the world. But even though Europe and the EU are pretty great and have amazing infrastructure, they obviously aren't perfect. And I'd love to hear some of the reasons it might not be, so leave a comment down below if you have some thoughts on this. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.
That was awesome. Not gonna lie, the more I learn, and I am in super early stages here, but the more I learn about Europe specifically, the more I'm just impressed. Very, very impressed. This was a great video. Make sure to use that link down in the description to check this out. Check out their channel. Obviously, having a family, that's a big deal. So everything's a big decision. But man, if I was younger and I'd have found this stuff out when I was younger, there is no doubt in my mind I would have loved to honestly move to Europe for a while, maybe longer. I mean, it just looks amazing. Hearing all this, either learning things or being reminded of amazing perks that they have in the EU, it's just kind of incredible, right? Like he said, going from Paris to Amsterdam, was it? Is that what he said? In that little time for that cheap, and then you could stay there, right, for a long time. It's just really neat. Very, very cool, and everything seems efficient. It's definitely something a lot of places in the world should aspire to. It's very impressive. Lots of beautiful places. I imagine lots of excellent food, lots of culture. It's just very impressive, and I'm really enjoying learning about it. Like I said, I would move there in an instant to try it out. I think it'd be amazing. Also, Australia, that'd be high on my list, because now Australia would be a little more in line with the U.S. when it comes to like traveling, like road tripping and stuff like that, because it's very big and a little more spread out, more like the United States, for example. But for other reasons, I mean, Australia is awesome too. So yeah, there's just so much I want to see in the world. I mean, that sounds cliche. I'm sure a lot of people want to see a lot of the world, but I tell you what, I do love the USA. It has a lot of pros, but it has a lot of cons. I'm aware of that. You know, it's where I was born. It's where I'm from. So of course, you know, I'm always going to have a tie here. But you know, the more I look at the world, the more it really opens my eyes, and I'm surprised the more people, you know, don't want to venture off, you know, which I know there's a lot of people that do move out of the U.S. But then, of course, there's a lot of people that do move to the U.S., and it's just kind of interesting, right? Please leave a thumbs up, a like on this video if you enjoyed it and maybe learned something. I know I certainly did. It will help the video out. Subscribe to join this amazing growing community we have here. I need your help. I'm on my way to 100,000 subscribers. Dream I thought I would never accomplish. Help me get there. And with that being said, y'all, check the description for this original video, as well as other ways you can interact with me, support me, stuff like that. My name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker, and until next time, y'all, catch you later.